disciples are on this boat. There was a big storm. There was wind, waves, and then they see Jesus walking on water. They're like, it's a ghost. In reality, it's Jesus just being epic. Peter's like, I want to try, and he does, but he freaks out and he sinks. Then Jesus grabs him and says, bro, focus.
All right, so I fancy myself somewhat of an adventurer, and so when I served as a missionary in a port town in Nicaragua called Corinto for over 10 years, I worked with a whole lot of fishermen there. And so I wanted them to take me out and show me what they did. I heard these stories like they go out on these boats and they spend all night long fishing, and then they come back with these huge hauls, and I thought, I want to go see what it's like. I want to go out there, and I don't know about the all-night thing, but like at least take me out. And so they agreed, and so we loaded up into this boat. I got this picture for us. And I know that doesn't look like a seafaring vessel, but it's all they had. And so we loaded up. They put this little outboard motor in the back. And as you're going, like the top of the boat is maybe 6 inches from the water. And you're just going and going and going. It seems like we went forever, but eventually we reached a point where when you looked out, it was just horizon. Land was a distant memory. It was just us out there in the middle of the ocean. And where I thought I would experience this marvelous, breathtaking presence of God, instead I felt terror. There's nothing here to save us. There's this little dinky boat, which seemed okay on the shore, but does not seem okay right now, and we're stuck here. And they're just casually going about their business, teaching me about the jug lines and dropping them in, and I thought it was going to be like a rod and reel situation, and that was not what was happening. And so as they go about their business and teach me, all of a sudden, the ocean starts to breathe a little bit. And there are these swells that take place, and before a wave crashes, it swells up. And so we start swelling up, and I mean 6 or 7 feet, and we are up in the air. The ocean around us is all below us, and that is somewhat terrifying, but even more terrifying when it came back down. Because when we came back down and everything else swelled above us, all I could see was walls of water around me. And I realized, get me back to shore, okay? The pirate's life is not the life for me. I want to be safe on the shore, and I will cast my line from there, but take me home. And it was incredible to me because these guys were just so casual and chill about the whole thing. And so we came back with no haul whatsoever, and with me knowing that I'm not ever doing that again. And the reason I tell you that story today is because as I read the story that we're going to talk through today, I immediately went there into this scary kind of middle of the water situation that's happening, and how a group of fishermen are so calm, and yet how Jesus can insert and change the whole scenario. If you're here for the first time, welcome. My name is Tim. I am our campus pastor at our Bedford location. And whether you're joining us online or at one of our campuses, thank you for being here. I hope you'll use the listening guide provided and follow along with today's passage and keep notes as to what we're talking about. But we're going to be in the book of Matthew, and the Gospels present this story of Jesus and his life on earth. And so in Matthew chapter 14, we see this really cool story. As today we close down the series, The Stories That Shape Us, it's been a really cool experience just to look at some of the incredible and crazy stories that God has written throughout history. And it really just shows us the power of who God is and how it can really build a foundation and shape us into who he's called us to be. And today I think is like the cherry on top, because this story is incredible. And so to set it up, Jesus would go around teaching at all of these different locations. And he would, like all of us, he would get tired, he would get fatigued. And so he needed some time to rest and relax and recharge. And so on this particular occasion, he sent his disciples to go and get the boat and start making their way across the water while he stayed back and he prayed and he rested and he connected with God. And Jesus would later catch up with his disciples. Now, the disciples were out there, and they got the boat, and they get out on this place called the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee is a pretty common setting for many of the ministries of Jesus. In fact, he recruited most of his disciples from those areas, and he really took on like 4 fishermen even who had great experience on the Sea of Galilee and how that would work. And so the Sea of Galilee is actually a little deceptive because it's not actually an ocean or a sea. It's actually a large freshwater lake. It's about 13 miles long, about 7 miles wide. It's a big, big lake. And the unique part about this lake is that it is the second lowest place in the world elevation-wise. And so if you're standing on the shore, you are actually 700 feet below sea level. And this created some unique weather phenomenon that occurred on this lake. Because of the hills surrounding the lake, the winds, when they would come over, would swoop down in and cause the lake to stir up all the time. And so these guys would have known how to navigate that. And so they head off, and the winds start picking up, and the waves start picking up. And let's just read what happens in Matthew chapter 14. It said, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had dismissed them, he went up to the mountainside by himself to pray. And later that night he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. So they're out there in it, but look what happens. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. Now we've got to stop here because it would be easy to read past walking on the lake, but that's a pretty big deal. Jesus is literally walking on water. And who knows how far these guys were out? They could be in the middle of the lake, miles out, and he just casually strolls up to them. And take a look at what happens in their response. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And then Peter got down out of the boat and walked on the water and came towards Jesus. This whole situation is crazy. First of all, can we just acknowledge that they were right to freak out? Like when a kind of a ghostly figure in the middle of a wind and wave storm walks up to you, you have the right to be scared. And so Jesus is casual, don't be afraid, take courage and man up. It kind of bothered me, but he's trying to get them to see who he is. And what I find crazy here is that this is just another casual miracle from Jesus. See, Jesus, as he does his ministry and he does these incredible life-changing miracles, he doesn't make this huge scene about it. He's not super theatrical or sensational. He just kind of does what he does. And as he strolls up walking on the water as if it's normal, and when Peter says, "Can I come out to you?" he says, well, come on. I think about last week, we talked about him healing the paralytic. What did he say to him? Well, just get up and walk. Or when he fed 5,000 people, well, just pass out the baskets and there'll be plenty of food. See, Jesus is trying to help them see that like what God can do is absolutely incredible to you, but it's just every day to me. And so Peter steps out on that water and is absolutely incredible. But take a look at what happens. When he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." This is a crazy, cool story because just the idea of walking on water is absolutely mind-blowing. But the fact that it wasn't just Jesus that walked on water. There was Peter. And Peter, typically very impulsive, and usually that gets him in trouble. He is always speaking before he thinks, acting before he plans. He says, "Well, call me out there." And he just runs out on the water with no hesitation, steps out, and it says he's walking on the water for a moment. But then it hits him. I think all of that kind of catches up, and it hits him. I'm not in my safe spot anymore. I'm not in the boat anymore. I'm not in control. And for fishermen, all of this weather would have been normal, but being out on the water in the middle of it, that wasn't normal. But I want to be careful that we don't just hate on Peter, right? First of all, who else was out there with him? Right? All those other guys, they didn't even have the faith to step out of the boat. And Peter, at the very least, he stepped out and went. And then as soon as he started to sink, who did he cry out to? He said, "Jesus, save me." So he knew where to turn and he knew where to look. And when I read that Jesus had chastised him and said, "You of little faith," at first I was like, man, that's a little harsh. But the more I read it, I realized that, man, he was telling Peter, like, buddy, you were right there. Like, you had the faith to step out. You know what I can do. You called out to me, but you doubted. You had enough faith to step out, but you didn't have enough faith to stay. And I wonder how many of us, like, when we get emotional, when we get moved by God, like, how easy it is for us to just step out and do. But the hard part comes staying faithful in the middle of all the chaos that surrounds us in our life. And that's really what the moral of the story today is. Faith is not about the absence of chaos, but it's about the presence of Jesus in the middle of it. And our tendency is to think that Jesus calms everything. He just makes everything better. He eases our chaos. And he does, but not like we think. See, our expectation often is that we'll step out in faith and God will just change all of the circumstances of our life, all of the challenges, all of the difficulties. He'll change all of that. But the reality is that generally our circumstances remain, but our position within them change. See, when Peter stepped out, the waves were still there, the wind was still there, but he was on top of the water. He wasn't in it. I know summer's ending this week and we're going back to school and life gets back to normal, but I want to take us back to a beach scene for a minute. And just imagine you're there. Soak it in one last time. The waves are crashing. And I know some of us, we like to go out there and play in those waves and let us hit, but eventually we get in a spot where we're out there in the middle of it, and these waves keep crashing on us. And I'm treading water and my head's above water, but every time I come up for air, I keep getting hit. And I circle back, and I come back up, and I hit again. And as I try to swim back towards the shore, there's a tug that keeps me back into this cycle. And it's just twisting and turning me. And I think for a lot of us, we feel like that's kind of how our life is. Like, I'm just out here in the middle of it. And even if I try to get away, some crazy chaos is going to pull me back in. But then I want you to think about being on the shore. Where's the best place to be on the shore? Right there in the waves where they're crashing against your feet. It's so refreshing. It's serene. It's the same waves. It's the same weather. It's all of the same stuff, except I'm in a different spot now. And I can be amidst the chaos of these waves without the danger of those waves. And so what I want to do this morning is talk about how do we get to that position? How do we get to the position where we're above, walking on and over that chaos? Well, the first thing we see from Peter, he fixed his eyes on Jesus. We have to fix our eyes on Jesus. Now, I want you to be clear here. First of all, nothing new showed up in Peter's environment. He was there, he was on the water, and it's not like a lightning struck or a new thing happened. It says, when he saw the wind, he turned. See, he averted his eyes just for a moment. And when he did that, he shifted his focus. And I want to be clear with you something today. And I need you all to hear this. When you take your attention off of the solution and you put it onto your problems, you will sink. When we take our attention off of all of the things that God has for us and the focus He's called us to walk in, and we put it back on the challenges that we're facing and the chaos of our life, we will sink. It's something I hear pretty consistently. I say, hey man, we missed you. They say, well, it's just been crazy. I've had this, and we had this happen, and this happened, and this happened, and all these things, and it breaks my heart because what it's saying is that our default, and this is normal for all of us, is to when something happens to take our focus off of Jesus and onto the problem. But keeping our focus where it belongs is actually what keeps us in the position where we belong. I want to get practical here for a minute. How do we keep our focus on Jesus where it belongs? I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he had talked to some of these AA old-timers, and they had this kind of wild but crazy wisdom that they shared with him. They said, you got to always go to Jesus. And so every morning or every night before I go to bed, I take my shoes, and I put my cigarettes in them, and I put them under my bed. That way, every single morning when I get up, I got to hit my knees before anything else. I thought that is completely absurd, but also very wise. And I'm not advocating we take up smoking, but what do? They took what they think they needed in the morning, the thing that drove them. I got to get my shoes on. I got to go out for my morning smoke. I've got to have that. And what do? Stuck Jesus right in the middle of it. And they said, you got to look at Him first. You got to focus where it belongs first before you move on to anything else. And I wonder for us, what is that thing in your life that you're like, I got to get up, I got to do these things? What is it that you are so focused on? How can we take and put Jesus right in front of us so that our focus has to stay on what matters? For me, I know that every single day I've got to get up and I've got to take a shower no matter what. Like, this is just a normal thing for me. I can't have a good day if I don't take a shower. I feel icky, I feel gross, I don't want it. It's just a bad time. And so no matter if I'm late or anything, I get up and I get in the shower. And so I've been thinking, how do I make sure that time is a time of focus? I've tried to start praying when I'm in the shower. I've tried to play the Bible app so I could hear Scripture being read. Just trying to make sure that I focus on what matters. The other thing for me is my phone. I'm stuck to it like a lot of us are. And so I know that we should be reading our Bibles every day. In fact, I encourage you all, like, if all you do is open the Bible app and read and think about the verse of the day, at least we're doing something. And so I wanted to do that. But I found that I got distracted and I missed days and the chaos of the mornings completely took my focus away. And so I set this notification on my phone. Every day at 7:12 a.m., it pops up and says, verse of the day. Now, for those of you psychos that don't care about clearing out all your notifications, and this is not going to work for you. But for me, I've got to check it, I've got to see it, I've got to clear it. And so I read it and I think about it. And it changes everything. How are we going to get focused? How are we going to fix our focus on what matters? Because He'll handle the rest. Now, Peter averted his eyes, but why did he sink? It says he sank because he was scared. He says he saw the wind and he became afraid. So the next part of this is that we have to reject the grip of fear. I'd say it's really hard to focus when you're scared. It's really hard to focus when you're scared. Fear is one of those things that it's overwhelming, to be honest. It blurs our mind. It can make us believe and think things that aren't true. Fear is a powerful and compelling feeling. And when we embrace fear, it leads us absolutely down the wrong path. And here's the thing about Peter, he wasn't scared of the waves when he was on the boat. He had had plenty of experience with this wind and this weather and this waves, and he was in his safe space. But when he stepped out, he lost control, and he got scared. And I don't know if you're like me, but I want to control everything. I want to know what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. I want to have a contingency plan. I want to know what my role is. And the times in my life when I am most unsettled and when I am most anxious and when I am scared is when I lose control. Is when I don't think I have a handle on it. But here's the problem with that. Stepping out in faith inherently means losing control. When we step out in faith, we're ceding our trust to God. We're giving Him the trust because we don't know where it goes. And Peter, in the same way, when he stepped out of that boat, when he was walking in faith, he was trusting in God, not in himself. And so we have to choose. We have this moment of truth that it comes down to, are we going to do it our way, which typically doesn't work for me, or are we going to trust in God? In Psalms chapter 46, there's this group of worship leaders, and they write this song about this. And they're called the Sons of Korah. And we meet a character named Korah as a man in Numbers chapter 16. And what we find is that this man had rebelled against God, and he had rebelled against Moses. And so as a result, the earth literally opened up and swallowed him whole. And so the guys writing this song are his descendants. They know that their forefather is famous for having rebelled. So they write this song, and I think it's so interesting. They said, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. I think that's something we probably all agree with, right? God is good. We love Him, but what do we do with that? Here's what they said. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. You think about, they wrote that, and they knew all too well who was in control of the mountains that quake and the earth that moves and the waters that roar. They know it's God. And so they're saying this, hey, when I put my trust in God, when I make Him my refuge, I don't have to fear because He's the one in control. And we've used a lot of weather references today. But the whole point is to help us to understand that we don't have to fear the things that are happening around us. God's got those. We've got to look to God. We've got to focus on Him. But it's not that easy, is it? What are you scared of? What do you have in your life where you're like, I've got to keep a hold on this. I can't let it go. If I don't hold this together, then nobody else will. What are we too afraid to just let go of? For me, that was our third pregnancy. So long story short, for 10 years we were married and we battled infertility. And honestly, to say we battled it, we just assumed it could never happen. For 10 years, we never got pregnant and thought, well, this is just our life now. And then all of a sudden, we got pregnant. And it was this miracle. It was the happiest day of our lives. We were like, this is absolutely incredible. God, amazing what you do. And then we miscarried. That was so hard. But we got pregnant again. Thought, okay, God, this is it. You took us through the fire, but now we're ready. And that made that second miscarriage absolutely devastating. So when we got pregnant a third time, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, I won't be a fool. Pregnancy number 3, way too scary. I'm like, God, I'm taking back control, okay? I'm done believing. So I started doubting. I refused to even believe, honestly. I was thinking like, if I just ignore that it even exists, then it will help the inevitable hurt that's going to come. But weeks started going by. We started hitting milestones, and I started getting more and more scared. Because now it wasn't just a line on a test. Now it was a dot on a screen. Then it was a heartbeat that I could hear. Eventually, I could see him on the page. I can't lose this. And I realized that fear had stolen all joy from the miracle that God had given us. For us, just being pregnant was like walking on water. It's like we never thought this was possible. And so I started to just analyze, where does this mindset lead? I started thinking about it like, am I going to be scared when my baby's here? Am I going to be too nervous and worried to hold him? What kind of father will I be if I'm this scared? Am I going to hover over him and not let him experience and grow in this world? Is that the kind of dad I want to be? And so I made a decision, and I hope it's one that you'll make with me. Invite Jesus into your struggle. And so I just invited him in. I was like, this is horrible and this is hard. I think we think that looks like, oh, well, I was just happy and okay, and that's not what it looked like. For me, it looked more like, why? Like, how could you do this? Not once, but twice. And now I don't even know how to be in this one. And I was angry, but he was there and we were talking. And so that authenticity, it led me to really honest reflection. It led me to gratitude that we were even at the point that we were at. And so by the time we had our son, and he's begun to grow up, he's almost 3 now. And honestly, I don't even remember life before. It's like my whole world has shifted. And I tell you, I couldn't even imagine 5 years ago to tell me that I'm here. Couldn't have even thought of it. I'll tell you where it didn't lead, though. It didn't lead to understanding. Honestly, I still don't know. Why do we have to go through that? Why 10 years in the desert? Why a miscarriage and then another one? I don't know. But I know that as we stepped forward, we got pregnant a 4th time. And then we miscarried. And that was hard. But there was a whole lot more clarity there. And when we got pregnant a 5th time, we had our son Micah. He just turned 1, and our family is complete. And what it reminds me of is just this idea that when we invite God in, he doesn't make bad stuff go away. He doesn't make the hurt just not hurt anymore. The waves and the hurts and the challenges, they're all there, but in the midst of that, there's peace. And I can't understand it. And Scripture describes this as a peace that passes understanding. In other words, there's something miraculous that happens when we keep our focus on God, that in the midst of all the things that aren't going well, in the midst of a world that's still crazy, when our eyes are focused, when we're looking at God, we can be okay. And so I want you to consider this. When life gets overwhelming, what are you reaching for? Who are you looking to? When things start to go crazy, do we take our eyes off of God? I think maybe some of us are like, my life isn't overwhelming. It will be soon. Start focusing now in the calm. When we build that faith up, those chaoses and those challenges, they only serve to strengthen that faith and that resolve. Peter would take this as an opportunity to grow and eventually would become the leader of the church and would actually perform miracles and do incredible things himself. We realize that we've got to keep our eyes focused. So I want to invite you today to pray with me. And if you're in one of these chaotic seasons and you just feel like you can't keep up, just step out and focus. Would you pray with me? Jesus, we thank you so much for who you are. We thank you that you're the calm in our chaos, that you're there with us, that you are casually doing these incredible things. And so, God, I just pray that you would help us to have the faith that we need to step out and trust you. If we struggle with this control, that we would give that over. If our hearts are broken and our world is chaotic, Lord, that we would just turn to you and we would invite you into that. God, I pray that you help us to take what we're scared of and give it to you. To trust that you've got it all worked out. And we're just going to focus on you. Lord, if there's someone here who hasn't stepped out in faith and given their life to you, God, I pray that they would reach out. That would be their first step. That you can lead us into something that is absolutely life-changing. We thank you for who you are. Help us to stay with you. In your son's name we pray. Amen.